Hi, everyone. This is the Sag Moon Sisters podcast. I'm Anna.
And I'm Steena. This is episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about the solar eclipse in Libra. This is occurring at 10 degrees on Wednesday, October 2nd at 11:48 a.m. Pacific time, 1:48 p.m. Central time, and 2:48 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today we're going to discuss 5 things to consider for this solar eclipse.
All right. So the first point we wanted to talk about is for this eclipse, Mercury is going to be conjunct the eclipse. So the eclipse, as Steena said, is happening at 10 degrees of Libra, and Mercury will be at 11 degrees at the time of the eclipse. So that's close enough for it to be considered conjunct. Right before this eclipse, so today is Sunday, September 29th, so just a few days before, the sun is actually conjoining the south node today, and Mercury is conjoining the south node today as well. The sun was earlier today, and Mercury is later today. And then Mercury and the sun will be conjunct tomorrow at 8 degrees of Libra. That's the conjunction with the sun is called a cazimi, and so if you see that word used anywhere, it means in the heart of the sun. And the reason that this is so important, especially leading up to this with things conjoining the south node, is that this is a south node eclipse. So it is a solar eclipse, but it's lined up with the south node. And south node eclipses are an emptying out point. It's a release, a flush, a clearing out. It's shedding the old, even though this is a new moon. And so what's happening here is something is being cleared out and a seed is being planted, like kind of at the same time. So something is being flushed out to make way for something new. This eclipse is happening in the sign of Libra, and Libra is all about balance, harmony, justice, relationships. And Mercury, of course, is communication, ideas, thoughts, exchanges. And so what we're kind of coming up on with this eclipse is that there is a shedding of old ideas in terms of balance or harmony or justice, and creating new ideas, learning new things, having new exchanges. It's also about shedding old ideas about how relationships should be, or what it means for there to be balance in relationships. Libra also is very much about relationships. And so what's happening is you're clearing out these old ideas and then bringing in new ideas of how balance is achieved within your relationships, how harmony is achieved in your relationships, and how you can communicate within your relationships in order to achieve more of a sense of harmony. Now, since it is a releasing point and this has to deal with relationships, this could also be a releasing of relationships that stand in the way of your own personal harmony and balance. It's a moment when our boundaries are being reviewed as well. Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra. And so when we look to Saturn, we think about boundaries and limitations, restrictions, responsibility, accountability. These are all Saturn things. And so this is a time where we may be reviewing our own boundaries. You know, it might be a moment where they're tested and where we're having to think about, okay, are these boundaries that I need, that I want, that I have to keep in my life in order to maintain balance? Or are these boundaries where I can be a little bit more flexible, where I might be able to release some of them and still maintain a sense of agency while also staying connected to others? And it's going to help create a more balanced and equitable way of communicating in relationships. That there's going to be this like less confrontational, reactive, and more focused way of communicating that kind of helps bring harmony into our relationships and into talking about and communicating our boundaries. And so with this eclipse, not only is Mercury conjunct the eclipse, but Black Moon Lilith is also at the same degree as this eclipse. And Steena, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, definitely. Love talking about Lilith. So there's a couple things I want to cover having to do with this. I am going to talk a little bit about some things that can help you look into your own Lilith placement, but then we will talk about the significance of Black Moon Lilith in Libra conjunct the solar eclipse. We've got the chart for the eclipse up here, and as you can see, we've got the south node at 6 degrees. We have the sun and moon at 10 degrees and 3 minutes. That is the eclipse, and then we have Black Moon Lilith at 10 degrees and 21 minutes. So this is really, really close proximity. And then really just a degree away is where we have Mercury, which Anna was just talking about. So to start, what is Black Moon Lilith? It's a calculated point. It is not a celestial body. There's like 4 different Liliths that you can pull up on an astrology chart. This one specifically that has the crescent moon with the cross coming out the bottom, that is Black Moon Lilith, and that is primarily what we'll be talking about today. But I did want to highlight that we have the calculated point, and this is the moon's furthest point from the Earth in its elliptical orbit. That's the simplest way to really describe it. Now, this is split into a true point and a mean point, just like the moon's nodes are. And the true point has more movement than the mean point. And this is because the mean point uses calculated averages. And so it's more consistent. If you ever have pulled a chart for yourself and you look at the true nodes or the mean nodes, you'll notice that they can vary, sometimes by like about a degree. It's usually not much more than that, but we're kind of looking at the same scenario here with our Black Moon Lilith. Before we move on, there is one Lilith that is actually a physical body, and that is going to be this symbol on the left side of the chart that kind of looks like a crazy W with extra legs. This is the symbol for the asteroid Lilith. If you pull a chart on astro.com, it's just going to say Lilith. So this is one of the primary ways that you can tell these apart. We really want to just be looking for this symbol that is the crescent moon with the cross coming out the bottom. We're not going to get into the Lilith asteroid today. If that's something you all would like to learn about, then perhaps we can cover it in a future episode. But for today, we are going to focus on Black Moon Lilith. This calculated point represents the parts of our femininity that are hidden in the dark. And this is different than, say what you have in your 4th house or what you have in your 8th house, or even your 12th house that are the, dark areas of the chart where maybe we're not always sure what's going on. Maybe there's stuff going on that's involving us, but it's because of our associations with other people. Lilith is your femininity and what has been locked away for mostly societal conforming and all of that type of stuff. Before I move forward, I just want to highlight that each and every single one of us, regardless of sex assigned at birth, regardless of gender identity, we all have divine feminine and divine masculine within us. We live in a world that in most places, femininity is looked at as a weakness. And maybe people aren't coming out and saying that outright, but there are plenty of examples of people saying exactly that outright. So these are, it can be a variety of different things, and it really depends on where your Lilith, your Black Moon Lilith, falls in your chart. To give you some examples before we move on to what Black Moon Lilith in Libra is going to represent, Anna and I are both going to talk about our Black Moon Lilith placement in our natal charts. So, Anna, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. So my Black Moon Lilith placement is in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, it's like the sign of the philosopher, the professor, the teacher, somebody who knows a lot and is sharing that knowledge. And so for me, this idea of I have this kind of idea of shame, or this feeling of shame around being wrong or feeling like I'm wrong. When I'm confronted with ideas that challenge what I believe to be correct. And we're not necessarily talking like morally, though that can come in. Like personally, I'm talking about like factual information, things like that. And when I'm confronted with things that challenge my idea of what I believe to be true, I really kind of experience this sort of discomfort, I just have this fear around being wrong. And I feel, there's this shame and worry about sharing information that might not be correct. And I think that what happens, or what Black Moon Lilith is kind of asking of me in this sign, in Sagittarius, is that I need to be more receptive. She's asking me to be more receptive. And the reason I am using the word receptive is because that's a very feminine idea, where masculine is very like active and go. Feminine energy is more receptive. It will receive, it will wait for it to come to them. And so for me, kind of what's happening is that I need to be more receptive and more open to opinions or ideas that contradict my own. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wrong. It's just different. Things aren't black and white. I mean, yes, some things are, but in general, things are not black and white. It's not right and wrong. And there can be multiple truths at the same time. What's kind of interesting is that Black Moon Lilith it's in the same sign as my moon, Sagittarius moon, hence the name. We both have that. But Steena's is actually in the same sign as her ascendant.
It's super fun, let me tell you. So for me, my experience with this is I grew up in, and I still experience this sometimes today, where if you have your Lilith, your Black Moon Lilith, in the same sign as your rising sign, you will probably relate to this. But if it's not in Leo, it could come up slightly differently. For me, it's the world is like, oh, love yourself. You don't want to be around like you're walking around self-loathing, mental health matters, all of that stuff. But the second we come into contact with someone who is comfortable in their own skin or projects the idea that they are, then they're conceited, they're full of themselves, they're this, they're that, blah, blah, blah. So I still, in my mid-30s, just barely still mid-30s, but that's besides the point, am still having to remind myself on an almost daily basis that it's okay to show up in the spotlight. This is who I am. There's nothing wrong with loving yourself. There's nothing wrong with being proud of who you are as a person. There's nothing wrong with liking the way you look. These are all great things. A practice that I've had in my life for as long as I can remember, really, I mean, this probably came about in my high school years, is that even if I'm feeling terrible about myself, I do not walk around talking about my insecurities and how much I hate how I look today or any of that, because I feel like if I am doing that, then I'm kind of setting an expectation that it is okay for other people to do the same. And let me tell you, me saying, I don't like how I look today, I feel like I look so tired, that's one thing. If a person, and I do not care who this person is, how close we are, how unclose we are, if we work together, if we have dated in the past, it doesn't matter. If you tell me, hey, are you okay? You don't look that great today. That's not going to go well at all, my friend. Not at all. At all. And so that's really how my Lilith in Leo shows up. Now, the Black Moon Lilith is about 11 degrees away from my ascendant. Thank goodness. Sounds terrible to have it any closer. Because again, like, we live in a world that tells you that you shouldn't outwardly love yourself. You know, people want you to love yourself to the extent that you're not walking around being negative and killing the vibe and all of that stuff all of the time. But the second that you love yourself and you're out about it and it's part of your personality and you are encouraging other people to do the same, that's when people's entire perception changes. This is not just, it's not like I never have this same thing happen to me. I have gotten into a pretty steady practice in my life now where if someone is speaking out for themselves or they're not afraid to shine or whatever, and it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, I'm like, why do I feel like this? And normally it's because there's some jealousy there. Like, I feel like I can't do that. I wish I had the confidence. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. But the truth of the matter is that the energy that's represented by all of our placements with Black Moon Lilith, that feminine power lives within you. It's just dormant and suppressed because we live in a society that has said that that's the way it is. And also, you may have had personal experiences in your life that lead you to feel that way. I have a relative who used to make comments about me being, conceited and cocky all the time and that I didn't have a reason to be and all of that stuff. But I was never any of those things. I simply just did not talk crap about myself in the presence of other people. So take all of that into consideration with Black Moon Lilith conjunct the solar eclipse in Libra. Libra gets shamed for beauty as well. Libra isn't afraid to take their time. Libra isn't afraid to show their beauty to the world. We're talking about one of the Venus ruled signs here. Just like with the other Venus ruled sign, which is Taurus, both of these signs, you're not going to push them into doing something that they don't see the benefit in. And so when we're looking at Black Moon Lilith conjunct the solar eclipse, this is a South Node solar eclipse, so there is a release and an end. Normally, we would look at a solar eclipse as being a new beginning, but that new beginning comes from the release. However, on top of that, this eclipse in Libra, this is the last eclipse in Libra within this cycle. So in that way, it is also an ending. And you're like, hey, that is totally contradicting. And I present to you the scales. It's both. Yep. It is very much both. With Libra, I would like to direct your attention towards the glyph for Venus. And Venus is right now in Scorpio, so we're going to see this at the upper left of the chart. If you look at the Venus glyph, this very much looks like a hand mirror, right? Both Black Moon Lilith and Libra get shamed for caring about things like beauty and love and all of these things. And the world will tell you that these are all superficial matters. But the superficiality in these things only goes so far. So with that, I would encourage all of you, everyone, to look at the ways that you engage with topics of love and beauty within your personal life how you present yourself to the world, all of those types of things. Are you someone who people are going to look at and say, oh, this person's definitely, they care about how they look. They, they always are wearing nice clothes. They always have their hair done. They always have their makeup done. They always this, that. And there's, equivalents for masculine energy in that as well. It can just be that you're dressed to the nines. You engage in self-care because you care about how you look and feel while you're out in the world. Look into those things and you're going to pinpoint an area where you feel shame. And that's when you take the deep dive to look into what you've experienced in your life personally and what preconceived notions there are about things like love and beauty within the world that we live in today. With both our Lilith placements as well as the house that rules Libra in your chart, this is going to go back to boundaries. With Lilith, especially Lilith and Leo, you get perceived a certain way, but you have to have your boundaries for what you're going to allow to impact you. Does it really matter if some stranger that you walked past on your way to work has this opinion? No, it doesn't matter. It's not really going to impact you in any way, shape, or form. My favorite thing to think when I'm having a day where I'm really self-conscious and maybe not fully embodying my Leo rising sign is other people's opinion of me is none of my business. Number one, mental health. One, mental health tip. From there, you can look at where you need boundaries. Are your boundaries working? Are they not working? Boundaries are the name of the game. I know that for some people, it's like, yes, I love when I get to do this. And then some of us are like, can you use the word boundaries in a sentence? Because I'm not super familiar. Familiarize yourself if you fall into that category. That's all I'm saying. Speaking of boundaries, Anna is going to talk to us about the grand water trine that includes Saturn in Pisces, mommy issues Mars in Cancer, and our lovely Venus in Scorpio.
Yes. So, I mean, here's Saturn again. We just talked about Saturn being exalted in Libra. And now, Saturn is in the sign where Venus is exalted. Venus is exalted in Pisces. And Venus is the ruler of this eclipse. And so when you go find Venus, as Steena said, Venus is in Scorpio. And it's not her favorite place in the world. She can be pretty intense there. But Scorpio is ruled by Mars, which is currently in Cancer. And then you've got Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, which is part of the eclipse. So it comes full circle.
It's all connected.
But yeah, so I'm sorry if that was kind of quick, but basically what's happening is you've got Saturn in Pisces, Mars in Cancer, and Venus in Scorpio, and they are all connecting pretty closely to each other. Now, this is not at its closest point during the eclipse. It will be actually a few days later. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what day. I believe it's the 5th, but don't quote me. And so what you're looking at here is Mars is at 16 degrees of Cancer, Venus is at 11 degrees of Scorpio, and Saturn is at 14 degrees of Pisces. And so they're close enough to really be activating each other. And on top of that, a few days after the eclipse, so this is on October 5th, the moon will cross Venus in Scorpio. And so the moon that was just in Libra as part of this eclipse in a Venus-ruled sign will then cross Venus in Scorpio, activating this grand water trine. Is what it's called again. And so while it will never be completely exact, it is still important to look at. When we're thinking about this setup here, I mean, you've got the 3 water signs being activated. And so there's so much here about emotions. It's emotional depth or intensity. With Venus in Scorpio, it is aggression or volatility or even anger, particularly related to your past or to your family, with Mars in Cancer. And then with Saturn in Pisces, there's compassion and empathy there, but it's associated more with like responsibility. What are your limits? How far can you let your empathy go before you become a detriment to yourself? How can you give compassion to others without hurting yourself? How can you receive compassion from others? Because that's really important too. How can you receive compassion from others without draining them or becoming a burden? There's a certain level of responsibility with Saturn. And so there's this idea, particularly when you look at this from the standpoint of Venus. Venus really wants, particularly in Scorpio, wants to get to the bottom of things. Venus is going to dive in. She can get obsessive. And so she's like single mind focused on trying to find the answer to whatever problem she perceives exists. It could be a real problem. It might not be a real problem. Watery worlds make it hard to tell. But if she's sitting here focusing on this, trying to get to the bottom of it and trying to establish that compassionate understanding and that balance that comes with this eclipse, if she's trying to create that balance, she's digging deep, she's getting intense, and sometimes with that she can maybe push it a little too far, maybe kind of cross people's boundaries, cross lines that maybe shouldn't be crossed. But then at the same time, it could be that whoever else is involved, there's no room for compromise. Maybe they are completely resistant to having their boundaries crossed. Maybe it's so firm that they're not willing to talk, not willing to negotiate. And okay, cool. There's definitely situations where that is absolutely needed. And so I'm not like saying that that's bad. But when it comes to relationships, a lot of times there is a need for compromise. And we're in a situation where, people are going to be pushing hard to understand. They're going to be filled with these intense emotions, which just comes along with all the water energy that we're experiencing right now. And it's very prevalent, of course, in relationships. Relationships are so much about emotion, but we've got the volatility right now. We've got the intensity, and some of that could become overwhelming, and it could just flood out your boundaries completely, but it reiterates the point from earlier about how this could be a moment of your boundaries being tested, that these emotions may come in and flood out your boundaries, but it may give you an opportunity to see which ones are necessary, which ones you need to keep, which ones you need to maybe repair or rebuild, and which ones maybe aren't as necessary. And that's something only you can figure out. And I think it's important to note with this that trines are unrestricted flows of energy. And so what you've got happening here is 3 trines all connected. And so it is this massive unrestricted flow of water energy. And like just in nature, we can see how that's happening right now in certain locations with Hurricane Helene coming through and being incredibly destructive. But water is such an incredibly powerful force of nature, and I think people underestimate it. There's so many like common human fears that revolve around water. And so I think this may be a moment of facing our fears too. We have to, just in the same way that we have to respect the power of the element of water, We have to respect and not underestimate the power of emotions. Emotions can come and go quickly, and they're not necessarily persistent, but they always have something to teach us. There is a message under the surface with our emotions, especially strong emotions. And you may be dealing with or be around people who are dealing with strong or volatile emotions during this time. And it's important to remember to pause before reacting if you can, to let that emotional volatility settle for just a moment, but also pay attention to what your emotions are telling you. They're telling you something important. And with all of this emotional, watery energy, it's important to remember that water can be wounding. It can drown you, or it can be healing.
It sure can. Speaking of healing. All right. Our fourth point, I want to talk about Jupiter in Gemini, sextile Chiron in Aries. I'm going to start by saying that Chiron is retrograde until December 29th or 30th. And Jupiter is going to station retrograde like a week after this solar eclipse. So that's coming. So to break this down, Chiron in Aries is a wound to your identity. There's conditioning through experiences that you've lived in your life that's leading to a fear of speaking out for yourself, but also for other people. When we think about the archetype of Aries, it's the warrior. Is the warrior just speaking up for themselves? I hope not. Goodness gracious, I really hope not. Even if you feel like you can't speak up for yourself, speaking up for other people, that is a way to work with this Chiron transit. And if you have natal Chiron in Aries, that's a great way to work with that as well. So by pushing through and speaking up, whether for yourself or for other people, you're not only healing yourself, but you're sharing your wisdom with other people. It can give people the courage to stand up for themselves. It can give people the courage to stand up for others. Don't fall into this box of thinking that healing the Chiron wound in Aries is all about me, myself, and I. Pop astrology would have you believe that. But when it comes to Aries, the things and the people Aries is going to speak up for are the things that Aries is passionate about. Sometimes there's great emphasis on the individual, but again, we're talking Aries being the warrior. We're talking about valor, all of these things. No one wins awards from wars, military service, whatever it may be, because they showed up for themselves every day, but not anybody else. So keep that in mind as we are working with Chiron in Aries. Alternatively, Jupiter in Gemini. Jupiter's not super happy. Is not super happy in Gemini. Gemini is the opposite sign of one of Jupiter's rulerships in the sign of Sagittarius. So it is in its detriment. And when you think about this, the easiest way is Jupiter is the teacher, the mentor, the philosopher, big ideas, well thought out, well researched, lots of wisdom gained over time through these activities. And in Gemini, it's jack of all trades. It's learning a little bit about a lot. With that said, this is going to be about networking. By healing this wound with Chiron in Aries, you sharing your wisdom through your experiences and your traumas and all of that super fun stuff that we just all love living through and sharing with other people. It allows you to create intellectual connections with others. And sometimes these connections will go far deeper than just an intellectual level. In my experience, one of the best ways to approach people with Gemini placements or just this Gemini energy is not going in expecting it to be deeper than surface level. This isn't to say that Gemini is incapable. Gemini is the opposite of incapable for going deeper than surface level. But it's not going to happen every time. It's picking your battles and things like that, you know. With all of that said, speak up. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for other people. Don't be afraid to make those connections. As I'm thinking about this in my head, I'm thinking about like ways that I can stand up for myself as an individual, ways that I can stand up for people who are being harmed by the structures that exist within the world. Those are all possibilities and ways that this energy can show up. But it could be something as random as you happen to stop at the gas station on the way home from work and you see someone being harassed by someone else. And so you speak up for them. You're not necessarily trying to pick a fight or anything. This isn't really necessarily going to have any impact on you personally, but you see an injustice and you speak up about it. That, in my opinion, is the way that you should approach Chiron and Aries. And it's going to represent and kind of show up in different ways in your life, depending on where you have Aries in your chart. You know, for some people, it is going to be very like intellectually based and pursuits of knowledge and things like that. But for other people, it will be standing up for yourself in relationships, standing up for yourself against unfair conditions at home, standing up for yourself as an individual, standing up in groups. The list goes on and on and on and on. With all of that said, I think that looking at the mythology associated with Zeus, aka Jupiter, and Chiron is kind of helpful in this situation. So in Greek mythology, Zeus and Chiron are stepbrothers. Kronos decided to take the form of a horse when he was up to his shenanigans off in the woods. And when Chiron was born, he was rejected by both his mother and his father for being a sextile, half horse and half human. Wonder why that happened. The audacity. So Chiron lives most of his life just in exile, but he decides to use the things that he's been through to help others. And he becomes this great mentor for so many people. Just to name one example, we could look at Achilles. There were, of course, many others as well. At some point in his immortal life, Chiron ends up getting stabbed by Heracles. Heracles has his poison-tipped bow. If Chiron had been mortal, probably would have just killed him, but he was not. He was immortal. And so he's just on the brink of death, but death could never come for him, essentially. At the same time, Prometheus was chained up to a rock by Zeus, having his organs pecked out for all eternity, meeting death every single day because he gave fire to the mortals, and Zeus wasn't happy about it. So Chiron comes up with this idea. He goes to Zeus and he says, hey, let me take Prometheus's place. You can just let him go. There's no need for both of us to suffer. I will atone for his transgression and all of that. And Zeus was so moved by this sacrifice that Chiron was just so willing to give that he not only freed Prometheus, but he freed Chiron from his own immortality and cast him into the cosmos as the constellation Sagittarius. And so when you think about these things, there's sacrifice involved. With Chiron transits, Chiron placements, and this eclipse, the whole vibe being boundaries, relationships, that's going to include sacrifice. There's no denying that is a very, very real part of the story that this eclipse is telling. So that is what I would say about Chiron and Aries and Jupiter and Gemini. Keep in mind, this is a sextile. And so sextiles have the nature of Venus, and they're going to bring elements together cohesively. There's a lot of potential for harmony here. But if you're not stepping up to the plate to speak up in whatever capacity, you are kind of putting a roadblock up for these elements to come together cohesively. I mean, I could talk about Jupiter and Chiron for freaking ever, especially because Chiron is on my natal Jupiter right now, and it's sextiling my natal Chiron, that transiting Jupiter is conjunct. So this is going to definitely hit a very key part of my own chart, and a lot of focus this year has been on my Jupiter and midheaven in Aries. So I'm really curious to see how this one plays out, and ask that you please share your stories. With all of that said, Anna is going to cover briefly the outer planet action we have going on. We did touch on this in the lunar eclipse in Pisces episode, so if you want some more info on that and you haven't watched it already, please do so. With that said, Anna, what do you have to share with us?
Yeah. So I don't want to go like crazy in depth with this since we did touch on it last time, but when you were talking, I remembered something that I read earlier in this lovely book, The Archetypal Universe. I know that's backward in the video, but there's a portion in here that talks about the energy of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto when they're together. Because you mentioned Prometheus and his role in the story of Chiron, and the energy, one of the descriptors for the energy of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto together is this kind of combining of Dionysian, or energy associated with the Greek god Dionysus, Promethean energy, and Apollonian energy, or the energy of Apollo, and in kind of the forms of ecstasy, the forms of joy and of pleasure around those qualities, the generative qualities of like Prometheus, the kind of indulgent qualities of Dionysus, and then you've got these kind of lofty pleasures that come with Apollo. Part of my reason for bringing that up is that Prometheus, in his story, he brought fire to the humans and it liberated the humans. And so a lot of this kind of energy with Pluto and Capricorn and Uranus and Taurus in a trine, and then with Neptune in the middle, in between them, sextiling both, it's in Pisces. There's this idealism that comes out of it. There's a glorification of freedom and democracy. It's a moment when this kind of collective energy when it's positive, you can really push toward collective liberation. Really, it's this emancipation or emancipatory energy, but it's also kind of a reminder that collective liberation of everyone is not possible unless individuals are willing to do their own inner work. And so kind of like the shadow sides that come along with that are that there can be obsessive or misguided rebellion, or ideological extremism. There can be a glorification of excess or indulgence. And then something kind of unfortunate is you get this almost like, on the positive side, it's almost this spiritual liberation, this kind of spiritual transcendence, this connecting with your psyche as an act of the divine. But on the other side, on the slightly more negative side, it's this almost obsession, like an obsessive focus on your psyche without the proper support for doing that work, or the willingness to do that work. And that can lead to delusion and confusion. And so it's part of why this outer planet connection that's happening is important is while it's not actively connecting to the eclipse itself, Venus will be connecting with all three of these planets during the month of October. And that is, I mean, she rules this eclipse. And so this energy is going to be very important. And it's already there. It's going to be hanging out for a while. And so when you look at the themes of Libra, you've got justice, you've got balance, you've got harmony. And this, it could be a moment when this energy can be harnessed to tip the scales back toward true justice, to bring more equality, to support those who have been living with too little, or to support those who have been put down, those who are in war zones, those who are experiencing loss and tragedy and discrimination. You know, this is a moment that could be so incredibly empowering and liberating for those people who are not experiencing or do not have as much access to freedom. And you know, throughout time, we have seen these patterns repeat. The scales are always being adjusted. It's always constant adjustments to try to keep balance. We're still working on figuring out what that is. What does balance mean? But I do think we know right now that we are not currently in a moment of balance and something needs to be done. So it could be important to look back on the lessons from the past, maybe even past Libra eclipses. They could give us some idea of what to look for, of what to keep in mind.
Oh, hey, I happen to have those dates right here.
Oh my gosh, what? No way.
So I'm going to go over a chunk of dates, but there's going to be more that I will add in the, I'll add all of them in the show notes, but the dates in the show notes will go back to 1995. I'm not going to go back that far for the purposes of time here. Last year is when we started our eclipses on the Libra Aries axis. And so last year on October 24th, 2023, we had an annular solar eclipse in Libra at 21 degrees. March 25th of 2024, we had the penumbral lunar eclipse in Libra at 5 degrees. Then the previous cycle dates back to 2014, 2015, and 2016. So March 23rd, 2016, we had a penumbral solar eclipse at 3 degrees of Libra. April 4th, 2015, we had a total lunar eclipse in Libra at 14 degrees. And April 15th, 2014, we had a total lunar eclipse in Libra at 25 degrees. Now, as you're thinking about these dates and the degrees that I just mentioned, if you have planets or placements or points, whatever it may be, in Aries, that's going to be in opposition to the lunar or solar eclipses in Libra. If you have placements or points at or around those degrees in Libra, those are conjunctions. If you have them in Capricorn, that's a square. And if you have them in Cancer, that's also a square. I bring up the squares and oppositions because that's normally what people want to look to right away to see what havoc was happening in their lives at that time. For the trines, you would just look at the other air signs, which would be Aquarius and Gemini. And then for sextiles, we can look at 2 signs over. So if you're looking at the chart here, that would be a sextile to Sagittarius and also a sextile to Leo. Those are all things that you can look at. And if you find something that aligns, you have that light bulb moment that lights your solar flame in the best way, please consider sharing that in the comments. That's the stuff that lights me up on a daily basis now. So
yeah, we'd absolutely love to hear everybody's stories.
So those dates will go in the show notes. And I'm going to hand this back over to Anna now. She's going to tell you about an opportunity that will allow you to access readings for moon cycles, including this lunar eclipse, or I'm sorry, the solar eclipse, as well as Mars in Cancer reading. They'll be donation based and proceeds go to a great cause.
Yeah, so do forgive me if I get a little bit emotional during this. Hurricane Helene just came through on Friday, and it's cut through Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, but Western North Carolina was hit especially hard. And emergency management officials up there, our governor, I'm in North Carolina, just in case anybody doesn't know that, but emergency management officials and our governor have, like, we currently don't know the extent of the damage or of the destruction in the area, but people are calling it catastrophic, biblical. Whole towns have been destroyed in this disaster. And the reason I'm so emotional, the reason I connect with this so much is I grew up in the Western North Carolina mountains. And there's this, mountain people are extremely resilient, but they're also extremely connected to each other. And, something that happens to one community happens to everybody in the community. And so just seeing my home region experiencing the devastation that it is experiencing is absolutely heartbreaking. And so what I want to do is, just as Steena said, I want to offer, and Steena will be doing this too. Well, we're going to put more details out. I don't know that we don't have it fully finalized yet, but we will give more information. The plan is to offer short readings for this eclipse, for moon cycles, for Mars and Cancer. There may be more later. We may change that, but the idea is to do that for donations to raise money for disaster relief for Western North Carolina, so that way they can rebuild, so people can try to get their lives even slightly normal again. I mean, it could be, in some areas, it could be weeks before they get power back. It could be weeks before anybody can even get in to help them, because of how isolated some of these communities are and because of how much damage there has been. And so all of the donations, all of the proceeds are going to go to Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, which is part of the Mutual Aid Network. And they will get that money to the organizations that are part of that network in the mountains who need it most and who can direct it to where the greatest need will be.
You came up with this idea all on your own. And those of you that are listening and follow us on other social media or do any classes with us and stuff like that, community has been such a recurring theme in Anna's oracle card readings and her tarot card readings, in the ways that the different moon cycles have been hitting her chart directly. But your Taurus Mars has been activated for like freaking eons, it feels like.
My Uranus. Uranus has been mean to me.
So it's been this like scenario of like all these questions, like, what is this trying to tell me? What is this trying to tell me? And she's come up with a lot of good ideas, and the things that she has shared with me, I've been able to come up with some ideas as well. But when she came up with this idea to do donation readings and sending the proceeds to help these people up in the mountains who mudslides, towns gone, access roads just gone, bridges gone, all of this stuff. We both got full body chills. And this is literally what the universe and the cosmos, and if you believe in another higher power, then that as well has been setting up. And it is terrible that this kind of thing happens to people, but it does give us opportunities to give back. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, this is definitely a moment for us to come together and to help each other out, to help create some more of that harmony and balance. And for me, I just want to say that like Libra is like my fourth house is in Libra, and fourth house is home and family. And so this, I look, there it goes. I got chill skin. But it just felt helping at this point just feels right. And so that's what we aim to do.
Yep. Libra rules my third house of communication. So I'm looking forward to communicating with all of you in whatever capacity. Right now, I mean, we're looking at moon cycle and Mars and Cancer readings. But if there's something else that you would like a short reading on, don't be afraid to bring that up to either of us. We will, of course, provide more information once all the details have come together. And you can follow both of us on Instagram, where more of this will, of course, be posted. My Instagram and TikTok are both at Sarcastic Sea Goat.
And my Instagram is at wandering.star.wisdom. And I will also share a link where you can just make a donation. Like if you don't want a reading or anything, like we'd love to give you one, but if you're not interested, I'll share a link where you can just donate as well, if that's what you would like to do.
Cool. Well, that is going to wrap up episode 2. By the time you guys are all watching this, it's October. So happy October, the best month of the entire year. And I don't say that lightly. Both of my parents have passed. One of them was born in October and the other one passed in October. So it's a heavy month for me, but it's still my favorite. It's a lot easier to be sad when it's so pretty and chilly and crisp outside.
Yes.
Happy Halloween. Live it up. Share your stories. And we look forward to chatting with you guys about our next moon cycle, which will be a new moon in Scorpio. No, we have a full moon before that.
Yes.
The Aries full moon in 2 weeks, and then the new moon in Scorpio. That's what you guys have coming up over the next month. So we're looking forward to it, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Absolutely. We'll see y'all then.
Bye.